Blog Talk Radio.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie, yeah, we're gonna be a movie,
Starring everybody
and me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of stuff that ends for us real happily. Be a movie, we can watch it all develop, starring everybody
and me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Hello, this is the 411 Summer Blockbuster Podcast. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified. And joining me, as always, is movie reviewer extraordinaire, the roving reporter on the scene, the vile one, Mr. Jeffrey Harris. Hello, Jeff. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, listeners and Mark. Remember, everybody, don't forget to watch your movie. Don't forget to watch your show.
That's right. All right, we're going to do a split 7-inch here like they do in the old punk rock scene. We're going to start off with The Lone Ranger. We're going to end with Monsters University. It's an hour of Disney, folks. Can you handle that? All right, so we're going to start right off with the movie that I saw the other day, The Lone Ranger, starring Johnny Depp as the that joke would have been funny had I actually remembered who the damn character was. Jack Sparrow. Johnny Depp is Jack Sparrow playing Tonto. Armie Hammer, Tom Wilkinson, William Fichtner, Barry Pepper, James Badge Dale, and Helena Bonham Carter. And a great role where she has a fake leg that is also a gun. Fantastic. All right, so The Lone Ranger, Jeff. Let's start with the most obvious question, because this Lily, you didn't see The Lone Ranger. You saw Monsters University. Keep those thoughts to yourself.
I agree with Lily, Mark.
Yeah. Let's start with the most obvious thing with The Lone Ranger. This is being panned by critics, and the most common critique of The Lone Ranger has been it was way too long in the middle. Let me first say, I was, for the most part, entertained by The Lone Ranger. I got a little restless in the middle, but that's not a reason for me to hate a movie. I mean, you want to talk about long and restless, you should watch The Deer Hunter. So it didn't bother me, but it seems to have annoyed the piss out of most critics. So first, were you entertained by this movie? And two, how did you feel about the long middle of the movie? Because again, the first kind of takes off really, really well. The end of the movie, with the William Tell Overture, absolutely fantastic. The middle, kind of a mess.
I thought it was an average movie that could have been a lot better. I still believe spending $250 million on this movie, likely more when you figure in print and advertising budgets, and whatever back-end deals you have for a team like Gore Verbinski, Johnny Depp, and Jerry Bruckheimer. I think spending that amount of money on something like The Lone Ranger, when high concept, big budget westerns tend not to do well out of Hollywood, I thought it was absurd. So I don't feel bad that the movie flopped at all.
Just watching the movie, I think, aside from the pay scale for the actors that were involved, Johnny Depp commands a high salary, for example. I don't think Armie Hammer does, but he's up there. Gore Verbinski is up there, obviously, as director. I think a lot of that money was obviously spent on effects. If you watch that whole end scene with the multiple trains and everything, you could definitely tell where they seem to have spent a lot of money on special effects. And they
built a full-scale working railroad for this movie, just to give you an idea.
And it looked great. I mean, you're kind of bitching about the budget, and on the one hand, I see what you're saying. If you know that these don't attract the world's greatest audiences, maybe you shouldn't build into it, the Avengers budget, because you're just not going to make your money back. On the other hand, it made for a stellar-looking movie. The landscapes, mostly was shot on location. The landscapes were really, really pretty. There's no from a technical aspect, there's not a whole lot to complain about here. It looks great, and
I mean, it looks great. You don't see movies made like this anymore. You don't see like those beautiful landscape shots, those beautiful vistas. Everything is kind of made like on computers and through sound stages these days. And, you know, green screen, blue screen. You didn't have that here, and now I love that. But and you saw a lot of it on screen. But that second act was borderline miserable.
Let's talk about that. Kind of walk me through your thought process of what your problem, because I'm imagining you mirror a lot of the critics. What you had such a problem with in that second act. Some have said that it was mishmash, they didn't get it, it just took too long to get anywhere, it takes him too long to don the mask and all of that. What was your problem with it?
Okay. My first problem is the framing narrative device, where they start the movie in 1933, where you have like 100-year-old Tonto working as like in a Wild West exhibit, and he's telling the story to some kid dressed as the Lone Ranger.
Real quick, I absolutely hated that. Absolutely hated it.
Because whenever you had those scenes, the movie literally stops dead in its tracks. All the momentum dies. I agree. I generally hate framing narratives like that because Depp looked ridiculous. The scenes weren't funny. It felt like they were really just catering and trying to, you know, drawing kids. But those scenes, to me, those scenes were not effective. I hated those scenes, and it just stopped the movie dead. Depp looked ridiculous. I don't know what they did with him with the old age makeup, but he looked horrible.
I want to stop you really for 1 second. I 110% agree with you. Yeah. If I have one major complaint about it, it is every scene starring old Johnny Depp and the kid. That was useless. You could have told the story without him having to do this entirely in flashback. And two, I didn't think it added anything to the movie. And you're right. I found the scenes between the two of them stopped the momentum of the film. I found those scenes boring, and they weren't that long each and every. You know, I kept thinking the Princess Bride.
Those scenes were so indulgent. If Gore Verbinski has a problem, he kind of overshoots things, and he can get very overindulgent with his narrative, which those scenes were. It just, I don't want to say the crude thing I want to say, but him and Depp were being very indulgent with those scenes, and it was the same thing in the middle. Like there was no sense of pacing. Not much really happened in the second act. You're just waiting for something to happen. Now, when things do happen, the movie really picks up and it gets exciting and fun, and there's a great sense of energy. But nothing about the second act really makes sense, and it all took so long. It was slog. It was like I was slogging through quicksand and I couldn't get out.
I want to two quick things. One, I kept being reminded of The Princess Bride with Fred Savage and Columbo. But those scenes were charming.
Peter Falk.
Peter Falk, right. They would break from the narrative of the movie, and it's him reading a story to his sick grandson, and there was a charm between the two of those characters, and I enjoyed sort of Fred Savage's, playing, eager and, and just what's going to happen next, Grandpa. There was no chemistry in this movie.
That was how the original author wrote the story.
Right.
And not only that, that was like, to me, that was like a fable storybook kind of setting. It was a fairy tale, and to me, this just doesn't fit that kind of narrative. And no, those scenes were not nearly as charming as young Fred Savage and Peter Falk. Not
in the least bit. The complaint that it takes too long for Armie Hammer to don the mask and become the Ranger, it's an origin movie. And I think that they set him up as sort of a fish out of water character right from the get-go. And the whole point of the Lone Ranger is the way that they set it up is that he is supposed to be to some degree a vigilante, an outlaw who is providing sort of street justice in a corrupt society. you would have to go a ways for that character to get to that point. So I was okay with the long journey it takes for him to get to the point where he says, "That's it, I'm fed up." I, for one, by the time they get to the final climactic chase with the two trains at the end of the movie and over the William Tell Overture, I jumped up out of my seat. I was so excited. I know a lot of people were like, ugh, by the time we get there, we just want the movie to be over. Yeah, I wasn't like that. They only lost me with the old Depp kid scene, and there were a couple of times where the movie slows down, where I got a little restless, but ultimately I had enough patience to get through it, and then I was very satisfied with the way that it ended. To me, all the movie needs is just lose every scene with old Johnny Depp and the kid, and I'm okay with it.
I think my problem was not that it took so long, but that when you have Armie Hammer, who I think has this great traditional look, I think he definitely has potential as a performer, but he's sentenced to being this rather buffoonish John Reed character. He's more like the comic relief sidekick. I know they're trying. I'm not really sure what the point was of doing a Lone Ranger movie in this way, of trying to make Tonto this sort of, I don't know, making Tonto the main, the brains of the operation, and almost making John Reed the sidekick, because Tonto in the movie is already, like, Depp's already playing him in basically a stereotypical fashion, whether he has Native American ancestry or not. It was sort of a stereotypical interpretation. And besides that, you have John Reed as the Lone Ranger being just sort of this buffoonish, pratfallish character, and you have Tonto basically undermining him and mocking him at every turn, and not just Tonto, but the rest of the cast as well are mocking him with these rather anachronistic phrases like "What's with the mask?" Like,
right.
This is set in 1869, like, and people are talking like it's the 1990s.
Well, no, it's not going to win any award for authenticity as a period piece. But here's my rationale for the way that they wrote Tonto in this. I felt like this movie was kind of a kung fu deal where you have, again, this character who starts off one way and he goes through this hero's journey where, where along the way he's mocking everything, but he comes through and he lives up to his potential. Luke Skywalker kind of a thing. Aren't you a little short for that stormtrooper outfit? That sort of thing. And that's why I was okay with it. You want to complain about Johnny Depp and Tonto, I felt like they had an opportunity to write a serious Indian character in Tonto. They decided, nope, Johnny Depp is really, really funny doing Jack Sparrow. Let's just settle for that. And that's Gorbavinsky's fault. If you put Johnny Depp in a role and be like, Johnny Depp, make funny faces in front of the camera and do silly stuff. Be a comedian. Then that's what you're going to get. Be Jack Sparrow the Indian. Well, that's what we got there. So I kind of, going into the movie, I just sort of prepared myself for that, and I didn't find it as grating as I thought I might have. I was prepared to hate Johnny Depp, and I ended up just finding him to be passable. But I actually like the fact that he was there sort of, mocking Reed and, whatever else, because nobody believes in this character, and then he has to come through and prove everybody wrong in the end. Well, I mean, you don't get much more of a classic hero arc than that.
But you see, even at the end, he's still getting mocked when he does the famous Lone Ranger sort of, Hi-Yo
Silver. I laughed
He's
at
like,
that. I thought it was
never
funny.
do that again. I'm like, do you guys really like the Lone Ranger, or did you guys just want to make a $250 million parody?
I think.
Now, if you remember,
I
Hollywood tried to make in 1981. They tried to do this big budget Lone Ranger movie, which also flopped. They cast an unknown as the Lone Ranger. It had a fairly prolific cast for the rest of the main cast. It bombed, but it also bombed, and it was sort of one of the bigger bombs of the year. And it looks like this one is going to follow similarly.
I don't think they like the Lone Ranger. Two things, because you started to mention this before. If you couldn't pick up some of the inner politics of this thing, the left-leaning politics, the pro-Native American feel of this movie, I'm guessing you're just kind of.
I mean, I got all that, but at the same time,
I actually was okay with it.
At the same time, the Native Americans are all slaughtered, and the only one that survives is this
crazy
joke
person.
of a character.
Well, they made him crazy, and that's what I was going to say before.
Doesn't represent a true Native American.
No, and they addressed that in the movie. They were like, he talks that way because he's nuts. That's not the way we are. So they right away they wrote him off as he is a he is not like the rest. He's an outcast. I was going to say he is an aberration. That's the word I was looking for. I almost went with abhorrent. He's an aberration to the Indian class, and we're not all that way. And so I was accepting of everything. By that point, then you can just make him do whatever he wants because he's not supposed to be representing the Indian nation. But the other part about that is, yes, it was very pro. A lot of this movie was very pro-Indian, but I also thought like the way they represented how white people treated the natives was accurate for the most part, from what I could tell. I think it's making people feel uncomfortable, and that's going to lead me to my next question to you. But I think the stuff that gets really into the heady white man Indian milieu makes a lot of the critics uncomfortable. I feel like it's very hard for people to sort of look at white history in the mirror and go, and be okay with some of the stuff we did to create this nation of ours. I don't have that problem. I accept the United States warts and all, and I can enjoy a movie that shows sort of the horrors of some of the things that we've done and be okay with it. It's a movie. This is history. Things happen. But that does go to my next question to you, Jeff, and that is, why do you think this movie is bombing the way that it is? Is Western culture just not into big Westerns anymore? Do we not like this sort of thing?
Everyone always says the Western is dead, but then we see. Look at Django Unchained. Look at Unforgiven in the 1990s. Kevin Costner made Open Range. Even that was a fairly moderate success. Everyone always says, the Western is dead, and then sort of a movie comes along that's basically a Western, and it's a huge success. I don't think it's that people don't like Westerns. I just think, I think Hollywood, they try and make it really hip and urban and modern, and instead of sort of embracing those traditions, and it doesn't really work. I think you have Wild Wild West. You had Will
that had a giant mechanical spider
rap song, a giant metal spider. You had Sex Appeal with Selma Hayek. It didn't work. They tried to make like a Western into a 4-quadrant movie, and it didn't really work. I think you have a similar thing with this movie. And then you have Cowboys versus Aliens, a genre mashup. So usually when you mix science fiction and Western, it doesn't really work. Western and comedy doesn't really work. They tried to do that here as well. I think not really a complete Western, but look at something like The Mask of Zorro. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, the screenwriters of this movie, they also wrote that movie. That movie was, to me, it felt more. It embraced its traditions. It was funny. It had comedy, but the comedy was actually funny. For one thing, the comedy wasn't really very funny here. Everyone was cast very well, and for the first time you had an actual Latino actor playing Zorro, interestingly enough. It wasn't as long. It was a much tighter movie, and you didn't have people with these really odd, anachronistic catchphrases. It felt more within the period, unlike this movie.
Well, another criticism this movie is receiving is the villain, Butch Cavendish, is gross. First of all, the actor that plays him, I think it's Tom.
I love Butch Cavendish, and Western villains should be gross.
People are, like eating the heart of the Reed brother, and just some of the other stuff that he does. Again, so the reviews that I'm reading on this, I think, are what are you people, children? But yeah, they're saying he's gross. And
bothered.
And he's too over the top as a villain. I mean, it's a superhero movie, for Christ's sakes. What do they want?
I think people, when I was seeing some of those criticisms, I think people were just kind of piling on. I think with some movies, critics do kind of get into a pack mentality, and they really want to trash a movie. I loved William Fichtner's performance in the movie. I thought he was great. I loved the character, his look, and how dastardly and scummy he is. It was a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was the most entertaining part of the movie, actually, more so than Taunt.
I've definitely seen some people say that he was the highlight of the movie. That his performance even eclipses Depp's. Were you getting the sense of this is yet another Johnny Depp playing Jack Sparrow kind of a feel? I mean, I know you've already said you didn't like his interpretation of Tonto, but I think my problem, I once complained on another podcast that I absolutely hate Johnny Depp in most things that he does. I just feel like it's the same thing in every movie, to the point that it takes me out of the movie.
I'm not really. I mean, I know Depp felt like he was. I know Depp claims he has Native American ancestry, and he wanted to give, a greater showcase for a Native American character on film. But it didn't feel. I didn't find it sincere or authentic at all. I just felt it looked like he was chewing scenery and goofing off, and as I said, being indulgent. I
felt like an Indian minstrel character. It was like, be a buffoon.
I don't want to say minstrel, but it was close. And then that whole end credit sequence, I guess they were trying to do their own kind of little big man thing. I know Gore Verbinski loves westerns, and he says he shoots all of his movies like westerns, but they really needed to rein themselves in here. And they especially did not with Tonto. Man.
What do you think went wrong? I mean, Disney's pretty good about keeping an eye on the budget, making sure that their productions don't go insane. I mean, as we're going to talk about with our next movie in another minute, how is it they can put out, one brilliant picture after another through Pixar Studios, but they lose control over something like this, which is supposed to be their smash hit of the summer?
I'll tell you what went wrong. Here's what went wrong. For Verbinski, Bruckheimer, and Depp, I think they got a little arrogant. We're the team that created the Pirates franchise, so we're going to, do it again. But with, we made a $1 billion franchise out of a Disney theme park ride. Now we're going to do it out of, the Lone Ranger, a fairly antiquated, dated property. Yes, a very classic property, and a property that, with imagery that's very iconic and everyone's very familiar with. But I think what went wrong is that no one said no. Disney should have just said no. We're not doing this for anywhere over $200 million. We're not.
Right.
I think where Verbinski, Bruckheimer, Depp, and company went wrong was we're going to spend over $200 million on making a Lone Ranger movie. I think Gore Verbinski really wanted to make a Western. Johnny Depp really wanted to play like an over-the-top, goofy Native American character. They didn't rein themselves in. They made Pirates in 2003 for $130 million. I think if they made this for half the budget, it would have been fine.
Right.
So no one said no. They didn't rein themselves in. They went crazy. And it's pretty much it. What
was the movie? It was made, decades ago. But it's a shining example. Cleopatra. It's sort of this decade's Cleopatra, where it's just an overblown thing where the studio just lost control of an entire project, and then the thing flops. Want to talk real quick about Ruth Wilson. Ruth Wilson, I thought, was an interesting choice. She's got an interesting look about her. The only thing that she's appeared in of note was she was in Anna Karenina last year. Other than that, she's been in a bunch of made-for-TV movies or television series. Yes.
Luther.
She was in Luther. She's presently in Luther, as a matter of fact. I don't know what that is, but you are correct, and I am reading that off of her Wikipedia page.
She also played Jane Eyre in a TV miniseries.
Yes, she did, back in 2006. So, what do you think of her? I thought it was an interesting casting choice. I think with a lot of these movies,
I love Ruth Wilson. I love her on Luther.
Mm-hmm.
Her mouth kind of, with trying not to sound mean here, but something about her
I'm
mouth
struggling with this too.
Is very intriguing, but also kind of scares me. Her kind of. I like that she looks different than the typical leading lady. I think that's part of her charm.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
She plays a pretty typical sort of damsel in distress role. I mean, I'd say it's a thankless role, but she did it well for what she had to work with. I wouldn't say she blew me away in this movie, but I think she did okay. And I would like to see her in more things after this, hopefully with some better material to work with.
Yeah, I felt like they were definitely struggling to give her something to do other than be saved. But I think she actually does a fairly good job of making herself a little bit more than a damsel in distress. I enjoyed her performance. The one criticism I was going to make, and it's not even a criticism, is just with a movie like this, typically a studio will say, well, who are we going to get to be our leading lady? Who's hot right now? And then you end up with, what's her face, as Sue Richards. But I was really taken aback by the fact that they went with somebody who was, A, not that well known, B, has an interesting look about her instead of someone with more softer features, who's one of the more hotter actresses in Hollywood. It was an odd choice, and I'm wondering if they did that purposely because it was a Western. But I'm also wondering if that's one of the reasons why people are just like, ugh, who cares? Who the hell is Armie Hammer?
They went with a smaller name role was more along the lines of because it was really a smaller role. Plus,
right.
She and the hero, I mean, spoiler alert, they don't really get together or anything. And she only has a handful of scenes in the movie. She doesn't have it's not really a big role.
Right.
Villains really have bigger roles in the movie.
Yes. Yeah, the movie definitely suffers from a lack of editing, overindulgence, all the things we've mentioned before. Would I recommend going to see The Lone Ranger? Not really. It's one of those where if I hadn't decided that I wanted to talk about it on this podcast, or also if I wasn't just interested in a big budget Jerry Bruckheimer film to see what he was going to come up with, see if he could wow me in a Western, I don't know if I would have gone into the movies to see it. This isn't Pacific Rim. I'm not chomping at the bit waiting for this thing to come out.
I would recommend it, maybe not full price in the theater. I think, watch it at your nice home theater at home for a rental or a Netflix.
Yeah. That's
where you don't have to, where you're not going to be as tortured, through that, that devastating second act. It won't be as bad. You'll be in the comfort of your own home, and I think you'll walk away with a better impression of a movie. And I think that's one reason why some movies just don't perform as well in the theaters. Some movies are just better rentals.
And that brings us to a movie that has succeeded. $400 million at the box office right now with a $270 million budget. So we could say that this next movie, also brought to you by Disney through Pixar, was a raging success. This is the sequel to Monsters Incorporated. Monsters University, which reunites Billy Crystal, John Goodman, and a bit of Steve Buscemi. who I love, by the way. He's one of my favorite actors of all time. So Monsters University, as Jeff just yelled out, is in fact a prequel. It is the story of Mike Wazowski and say the character's name.
Mike Wazowski.
Right. What's the Sully? Couldn't remember John Goodman's character.
Named Sully Sullivan.
Right. So Mike and Sully in their college years and how they got to be friends and what led them to Monsters Incorporated, etc. Real quick, just on a personal note. Again, I don't know if I would have run out to go see this movie, except that I have a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old now, and I wanted to see how well she would do at the movies, because there are movies that are made for kids that I do want to go see, and Star Wars is going to be here before you know it, and I want to be able to take her to that. Though she'll be, I think, 4 at the time, so I wanted to see how well she would do sitting in a movie theater and getting through this one, and which leads me to really my only criticism. At 103 minutes, this was a little long for a kids movie. It was fine for an adult movie. I didn't feel like it dragged at all. I didn't feel like I wasn't bored, or like I said, I wasn't, kind of shifting in my seat a lot like I was with the Lone Ranger. I just felt like for a kids movie, this could have been a little bit tighter, and I'm going to tell you from personal experience, not just my kid, so you can't be like, she's got ADHD, she put her on Ritalin, Radulich. No, my kid was not the only one who, by the third act, was ready to jump out of her chair and take a walk around the theater for a bit. There were other kids up and kind of like, can't hold myself together, and it was from 2 to on up. So Pixar could have shortened the movie length a little bit, and I think might have been a better presentation. But that is literally the only bad thing I can say about this movie, which isn't really a bad thing.
Interesting, because it seems ever since Finding Nemo, Pixar has sort of bucked the usual trend of animated feature length. Generally, you keep it at 90 to 95 minutes, and they've made some about 2 hours long, which you very rarely see, especially for animated films.
Well, it's hard to, when your target audience is kids who, never mind, the mentally disabled with ADHD, just kids in general have short attention spans. It's hard to keep them.
Then I think having the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter movies, which kids go gaga over, kind of changes that as well.
Yeah, but those are not geared for younger kids. Those are, first of all, if anything, those were geared for adults. They used the children's property and made adult movies out of them. And yeah, some kids went to go see them, but they sure as shit weren't too fun.
I saw a lot of young kids through the years at Harry Potter.
Maybe more so at Harry Potter, but not Lord of the Rings, not in any of the showings that I went to. But all right, what did you think of Monsters University? We've read your review for both this and The Lone Ranger. We know you liked it, but tell us why. What did you like about Monsters University?
I love Monsters University. I love that we got more of a story focused on Mike. I loved that it was set in college. I love the college setting and sort of taking me back to those times, and the music, which you had sort of the college fight songs and marching themes going throughout the film. And it's also sort of a nice lesson that the things. It's not, if you can't do what you dream of doing, it's not the end of the world, and you can find your talent through other things. And if one door closes, another opens, which I talked to about with the film's story supervisor, Kelsey Mann, one of the bigger creative influences on the film. And you can read that interview in the Movie Zone. And I also like that it kind of bucked our expectations. Mike and Sully, when they first meet, are not friends. Sully's actually, for the first half of the movie, he's pretty much a bit of a jerk. He's pretty much an a-hole, big time. And when we meet characters like Randy Boggs, the villain in the first movie, he's downright docile. He's friendly and chummy and sociable. He's not at all like the character he is in Monsters, Inc., and I thought that was really fun and amusing. I have a problem with prequels in general, but I like this movie and what it brought to the table, and especially the supporting cast. All the supporting monsters were really fun, amusing, appealing characters. The Uzma Kappa, buddies were all great characters. It was a great world-building movie for the world of the monsters, so I like that. The movie isn't perfect. It has a few things I probably would have changed. And ultimately, you have a movie about sort of, the people wanting to be scares when... Here's my problem with it being a prequel, because we know by the second movie that scaring is bad and wrong, and it doesn't create as much enemy as laughter and fun from children, and everything in the movie is sort of based on a lie. I think if you can overlook that, you can have a good time and enjoy the movie a lot, and it's very easy to overlook and just enjoy the movie, and visit like I felt like I was visiting old friends, so it was great to see all these characters back.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they switched the focus from the first movie, which was on John Goodman's character, Sully, to Billy Crystal's character, Mike Wazowski. I actually thought they gave him an interesting backstory, considering he is not the primary scarer from the first one. It's actually funny because in the first movie, he's more of the jerk than Sully is. Sully's just kind of doing his thing, and then and then this human enters their world and turns it upside down, and he instantaneously just cares for this child and wants to make sure she's safe. And the whole time, Mike is like, "What about me? What about Raven?" And in this movie, that turns that dynamic on its head. What'd you say?
I was just exasperated over you saying, "What about Raven?"
I love that. What about me? What about Raven? Hey, we both work for a wrestling site. People will like that reference.
I work for an entertainment site.
Yeah.
That started as a wrestling site.
So anyway, no, I like the dynamic is flipped in this movie, where Sully for the most part is the jerkwad, and Mike is a is a character that you root for, and he's the plucky underdog in this thing, and he's the plucky underdog through the whole movie. So what do you think about the sort of the false ending? The movie had a very natural ending where Mike finally, gathers everything he's gotten from this movie into one final, it's a make or break moment, and he does it, and he wins the game. Spoiler alert: he wins the game, and and he becomes the scary that he thought he always could be. And you're like, okay, the movie's going to be over, right? Nope. There's like another 20 to 30 minutes to go, because that's not the real ending of the movie.
I have a couple thoughts on the movie, and here's where the movie kind of almost falls apart for me. Now, my problem with the whole end sequence is because, the whole movie, Mike is the underdog, and Mike is being told, you're not scary, you can't be a scarer. And when everyone's telling Mike that, I kind of want Mike to say, screw you, you're all wrong. Mike is going to become a good scarer, and Mike is going to prove all you're wrong, even though basically being a scarer in itself is wrong. But I kind of want to see Mike succeed and win the game and all that. And not only that, the kind of problem with the movie basically reinforcing that Mike isn't scary, not even a little, and yet we see his partners of Uzma Kappa who are no more or really less scary than Mike.
Right, the pink one with whose mother is in the movie. That's the least scary thing I've ever seen in my life, and I scare pretty easily.
They all get back into the scare program, and they get back on the road to becoming scarers, and apparently they impressed the scaring school dean, Dean Hardscrabble, voiced by Helen Mirren. Very good job. So, and then you have this whole big sequence. Mike takes them on a little field trip. They break into Monsters, Inc., and they look at all the different monsters. And Mike's like, it doesn't really matter what you look like. There are monsters of all shapes and sizes that don't really look the scariest. It doesn't really, and that to me was a really poignant, effective scene. And I feel the movie kind of sends mixed signals in that regard. The Uzma Kappa characters weren't really more scary than Mike, so I'm not really sure what they were. I feel there was a bit of a tone balancing issue there that didn't quite work for me. I kind of overlook it because overall, Mike's sort of journey of his sort of journey of discovery and acceptance, I think, was good, and realizing, it's not the end of the world, getting expelled and not being what he ultimately wants to be. It's not the end of the world for him. He still finds his hidden talent, and he can still succeed. All that I like, and all that worked for me. But the other things I mentioned didn't work. But go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, the one thing, I'm wondering if it's a stronger, tighter movie if they just don't lose that entire bit where he goes into the human world, and he just loses. He just flat out, they don't muck with the machine at all. He just does his worst, and it fails. The thing, you get the same element where he tries to scare the kid, and the kid goes, "You look funny." If the machine doesn't react at all to him, they lose, they're all out of the program, and go right to the scene where they're leaving school. You can do all of that, and you don't have this whole other. That's the thing, because I kind of agree with you. I feel like they went to this really, really odd route to get to the exact same place.
I agree. And then you have this sequence where you have the dean sort of has to be sort of see that this team has talent and they can do great things in the future. But I don't know. I kind of agree. I think maybe if you had Mike lose the big game and kind of just, instead of giving Mike the Rudy moment or whatever, to just have him lose and fail miserably, maybe you could have achieved the same result.
Yeah. I don't know that much more to say about it. Obviously, the Pixar continues to put out stellar-looking movies. There's absolutely nothing, I think, to complain about as far as the animation. You felt like you were in that world. I love the variety of monsters in this. My two favorite characters in this whole thing were the MCs for the scare games. The girl
that was Tyler Labine and Aubrey Plaza.
They were awesome. They played Claire Wheeler and Brock Pearson, and they were my two favorite characters in this entire movie. But I know you liked Art. Who was one of the Uzma Kappa guys who looks kind of like Animal.
Voiced by Charlie Day from Always Sunny.
Yeah. What did you think of the villain in this thing? There really is only one, and that's the dean. I mean, you could, to a lesser extent, it's the other fraternity, but they don't really do anything particularly villainous. They're just jerkwads. They're kind of insulting.
I mean, everyone was very well voiced. Helen Mirren created a very fun character, and Dean Hardscrabble, a great design.
Were you waiting for her to do something Were you waiting for her to do?
I kind of wanted. I felt like there should have been, I don't know, like some sort of blow off with her, almost like with Waternoose in the first one.
I would think so. They created a fucking dragon for her. Well, hang on a second. They created a dragon that looks like it came out of D&D, and they did nothing with it. She's just, they might as well have made her a librarian, type monster. I was waiting for her to breathe fire, go crazy, do something, look scary for Christ's sakes. At least Waternoose in the first one looks really, there's a scene with him and Boo where he looks really menacing. I think they wasted an awesome look because they don't do anything with it in this movie.
I kind of want to see what would happen to Hardscrabble after they took away scaring from the monster world. Basically, my problem with prequels is that I don't really like looking back. I don't really need to see how things happen. I want story progression. I want things to evolve. As much as I like this story and how it's nice to see how Sullivan and Mike became friends and how they formed this bond and how they came to work at Monsters, Inc. and how Randall became who he is, all that's interesting to me, but I'd much rather see what happens next. I want to know what happens after Sully opens the door and he finds his sort of adopted child again. Has she grown up? Is she a teenager now? What did she remember him? I want to see what happens there, if anything. at the same time, I'm not really sure you can make that sequel because if you think about it, that's really the perfect ending. So I still like the movie.
Why do you feel like, Pixar is just an amazing studio that's put out some pretty stellar movies, from Up to Cars to Monsters Inc. Why do you feel like they need to do a sequel to any one of these movies, which by themselves stand alone as some of the best motion pictures to come out in the last 10 years, many of them? They're often better than the Disney animated flicks proper. Why do you feel like they need to go back to the well and do sequels on these things and just not continue to put out new content?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, Pixar makes sequels better than anyone. Look at Toy Story 2. Look at Toy Story 3 and how beloved they were. People really respect the Pixar filmmakers and the brand. When we saw Toy Story 2, instead of it was originally just going to be a direct-to-video cash-in, and then they decided to make it a theatrical release. They put a lot more money in it, and they got the original cast, and it was an amazing revelatory experience. Toy Story 3 was the same way. It was, and they were really emotionally poignant films. So now Cars 2, I would say Cars 2 was a misstep. But I would also say Brave was a bit of a misstep as well, and was sort of tonally imbalanced and kind of felt derivative, and it was kind of a lost kind of movie. But I don't see why can't they make sequels? I mean, they do sequels and they know their characters well as just about anyone. If they have a story to tell, I say go for it.
Okay, that's it. Is there anything else you want to talk about with Monsters University, or if there's anything we left out on the Lone Ranger, now's the opportunity.
I mean, just, for Monsters University, just in terms of, technical and technique, I mean, the movie looked outstanding. It's visually amazing. Just, you figure no one monster looks like any other. No monster looks the same. All of them look unique. And I thought when Monsters Inc. came out, like the things they did with all the detail in that movie was spectacular, and they did it up to 11 here. And just getting to see more of the monsters world, getting to see where they go to school, just opening things up. I really like what they did in terms of world building in this movie. I would have maybe liked to seen a little bit more of Roz, who had a little throwaway cameo there. We did get the Abominable Snowman for the first movie, and I hope everyone stayed after the credits for the credit gag.
Yeah. Okay. So next summer review podcast, we will be doing Pacific Rim. That comes out this Friday, July 12th. So the Monday after that, provided I make it to the theater and can go see this thing, that'll be the next movie Jeff and I will discuss. We will spend 1 hour relishing in monsters and robots. It's going to be fantastic.
Right, I'll be seeing Pacific Rim tonight, so we'll be having an early review up of Pacific Rim later this week. So go to 411mania.com/movies on Thursday night. Read my Pacific Rim review, then come back on Monday and listen to our podcast on Pacific Rim.
Right. What else you got going on, Jeff?
Elbow rockets. Launch the elbow rockets. We're canceling the apocalypse, Mark.
Every time I look at Idris Elba, all I can think of is, hey, weren't you in The Wire?
All I can think of when I look at Idris Elba is that's John Luther, which is better than The Wire.
No, it isn't. Nothing is better than The Wire. Answer my question.
Luther is better than The Wire. The Wire is overrated.
You're overrated. The Wire is the best show in the history of television.
Never even watched Luther, and you know Luther. If you did, you would know Luther is the better show.
I don't have to watch Luther to know that The Wire is the best thing ever put on television. Come on now.
I've watched both, and I know, and because I have the knowledge and wisdom of having watched both, unlike you, I know which one is truly better.
I will accept that challenge. I will go back and I will watch Luther, and then I will assure you that The Wire is still better.
of Luther in the upcoming third season, and you'll know the truth.
That The Wire is better than Luther. Got it. What else you got going on 401?
This is the show that got Idris Elba his Golden Globe Award.
Okay. What else you got going on?
The Wire never did that for Stringer Bell. Luther
no,
did
it did
for
not.
John
But
Luther.
I think it's still highly regarded as one of the best shows on television, even though it did not win as many awards as it should. But just because you win an award,
And it won 11 Academy Awards. What does that tell you?
Sometimes the Academy doesn't know what it's doing. Listen, the Academy Awards, lots of things I think are crap. That's not the point here. What are you doing on 411, Jeff?
Okay, so we got the Pacific Rim review coming up. Thursday is the UFC 162 edition of the MMA's 3Rs. The Anderson Silva era is now over, so you'll get my thoughts on that. Next week I'll be going to San Diego for San Diego Comic-Con, so I'll be looking to have some coverage from there. So please look forward to it.
All right.
What are you
Jeff,
up to, Mark?
What am I up to? Well, Sunday, of course, Jeff and Robert Winfrey were on the 401 Ground and Pound radio show where we reviewed UFC 162. We talked about everything that was Anderson Silva and all the rest of the fights that were on the card. We looked a little bit at Invicta 6. Tomorrow night on The Long Road to Ruin with Sean Comer, we will be tomorrow night is not The Long Road to Ruin. That's a week from tomorrow. Tomorrow night is the Music Zone podcast where Robert Cooper and I will be reviewing Super Collider by Megadeth. A week from tomorrow, my wife will be on the show, The Long Road to Ruin with Sean Comer, and we will be doing the entire Twilight Saga. Another 2+ hour podcast, all 4.5 movies, 5 movies, however many there were, in one shot, because we only got one shot to get my wife on this thing.
Is your wife a Twihard?
No, she's not really a Twihard. She read the books. She really, really liked the books, and she wanted to like the movies more than she really did. We actually watched the first one again last night in preparation for next week's podcast, and she looked at me and she said, God, they only get worse after this. But she loved the books. I remember she shut down for an entire weekend and just read through every single book. But she was not totally impressed with the movies.
All right, who am I to bag on? Women don't understand why I like MMA, so who am I to bag on their entertainment?
So we're going to talk all about the Twilight movies. You can catch me on not one but 2 WrestleCasts on the Casual Heroes podcast. We did one entire full-length one, and then we just kept on talking. So we hit the record button again, and there's a really funny sort of after show which was called Voicemail, where basically we recorded half the show on one of the guys' voicemails. It was pretty funny at the time. So you can check me out on that. You can also check out From the Right Radio's The Right Hook, Thursdays at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. All right, so for Jeff Harris, I am the mandated reporter, Mark Radulich. This has been the 401 Summer Blockbuster Podcast. We will see you next week when we discuss monsters and robots.
Hey!
That's right. See you then, everybody.
The apocalypse.